I'm super stoked to be here for 7.Studio today, doing a tutorial for you using my brand new collection, Fortune Teller. I'm so thankful to be designing lines for 7.Studio, and I'm really excited to be on the blog today. I'm starting with 4 die cut tags using the Sizzix number 8 movers and shapers tag, and I have cut it out of the palmistry paper, the 12 by 12, and it's this gorgeous kind of rusty orange brown textured on one side, and then the other side is kind of a cream colored lacy feel. I have punched some random holes in the top layer of each tag. I layered one light tag on top of one dark tag and one dark tag on top of one light tag. Then I punched some holes in the top layer so the bottom could show through. I have used my sewing machine to sew around the edge, leaving about 1/4 inch, and then I have used some scissors and different distress tools to distress the edges of that. This is a piece of chipboard from UmWowStudio that matches the Fortune Teller collection. It's a coordinating, not matching. Piece of chipboard, and I've got a paintbrush, and this is some Verde paint. It's very cool. It has a metally, like a metal effect after you use it. First you put down, it comes with there's 4 different types of paint, and then a catalyst. It's a kind of like a blue colored spray. So the first step is to cover the piece of chipboard entirely in paint, and I am using the black one. I'll have to look it up, but I'm pretty sure this is the iron. And I'm just covering the chipboard piece completely, making sure that all the little sun rays are covered. This is, I can't remember if I gave the name, this is the Sun and Moon chipboard from UmWowStudio. Covering that completely, and then let that dry, or you can heat it with a heat gun. I am a little bit impatient. If you can let it dry in the air on its own, even better. Then you paint a second layer, fairly heavy. Fairly heavy. That's why I used a bigger brush. And then you get out the spray. Oh, and the thing with using a bigger brush, though, is the paint got into some of my smaller areas, like in the eyes on the moon, so I was just getting some of that paint out there. But then, while the paint is still wet, you're going to spray it with the teal or blue colored spray that it comes with, and it's going to create a rust effect, some oxidization, and then it's going to become rusty, and it's very cool. And sometimes I do it twice if I need to. Here you can see now I actually did do this twice. I just didn't show the second one on video because it didn't need to. Then it actually is very rusty smelling and metallic smelling. So after I'm done with those pieces, sometimes I give them a clear coat spray, and at first it will look like the rust disappears or the oxidization disappears, but then as it dries, it comes back. Then I've gotten out the tarot 12 by 12, and I've cut out the soul, which is the sun tarot card, and I'm going to ink the edges both where I cut the paper out and sort of into the graphic. And I'm going to, and heat that. I do use archival ink a lot. It's permanent when it's dry, and I really, really like that. So I make sure that's dry completely, and then I'm using scissors and my fingernails and going back and forth and distressing the edges of that little, it's kind of like a little card now, little miniature tarot card. And that's going to go on my dark tag. Here I've got a piece of muslin. I'm going to pull out some DMC floss in kind of a cool muslin or ecru color, and I'll make sure and have all those tools and supplies linked appropriately. I've got a needle, and there's my DMC floss. I'm going to do what's called a walking stitch. That's where you just go in and out, in and out, in and out along the edge. The really cool thing about a walking stitch is once you have it all the way down the length of the fabric, you can pull on it to tighten it, and the fabric is going to bunch up on that thread, and you can create really cool rosettes this way, or just some kind of scalloped fringe type fabric in general. Here goes that walking stitch. You can see in and out, and I do tend to bundle it up, kind of stack it onto the needle for quite a while, and then I'll pull it through. And that's just, it serves 2 purposes. One, it kind of helps me move quicker while I'm doing this, but 2, I can see exactly the how wide those scallops or ruffles are going to be. The bigger your walking stitch, then the bigger the ruffles are, and the smaller the walking stitch, the smaller the ruffles are. I'm just going to tie it off here, trim it out, and I've kind of made a little skirt for the card that I cut out of the fortune teller collection. And then I'm just kind of pulling the fabric back out along the length of the thread so that it's sort of even, but it's vintagey and kind of chunky, and I really, really enjoy the way this looks. Kind of checking stuff out. You'll kind of see me reposition stuff back where I want it. I work in layers. I work in heavy layers. I work in like in 3D and in 3-dimensional layers. So I really like things to pop up and recede into the background. So I don't always glue things down as soon as I'm done with them. I kind of hold on to little pieces and parts until they come together harmoniously for me. And if you've watched any of my videos before, I may have mentioned it, but if not, I'm kind of a thinker. I break off and take time away from my project to come back and finish it later. So it's good if I don't glue anything down until towards the end, that I'm not stuck with anything. I did staple my little skirt on, and I ended up tucking it behind the back so that I could still see the L sole part of the card. And now I've cut some dimensional adhesive foam dots. I am actually not even sure the brand. I've cut them in half so that they have an edge, and I've put those onto the back of my card so that it will pop up. Later, I'll add a second layer. For now, that's good. There, now you can kind of see how everything's coming together. I'm getting out some heavy gesso. I use the Blick version. I teach a lot of classes, and so we go through a lot of gesso, and this gesso is fairly affordable, as well as it comes in very large, like gallon-sized jugs. So I pick those up. It's also a high quality. I really enjoy how it works. I'm using a palette knife, a plastic one, and I'm kind of scraping some gesso, the heavy gesso, across the backgrounds. And it's just going to help me kind of, right now I have a very dark tag and a very light tag. And by using the gesso, it kind of brings them to a closer middle ground. I'm going to, heat that up, make sure it's dry. I do have to take the wet mediums in slower layers than I would on another project because it's paper based. And it's not like cardstock or canvas or anything. So I go a little bit slower and make sure all my layers are dry before I add another one so that the paper doesn't buckle too much. This is Golden High Flow acrylic in the sepia color. I'm going to use a paintbrush and some water to kind of mute that really stark white background that I have now. And I'll go back and forth. I did splatter some, and then I used excuse me, the paintbrush and a little bit of water to kind of spread it around. I'll splatter some more. I'll heat it. I'll splatter some more. I'll heat it. I'm also changing the consistency of the paint, and you'll kind of see in some areas I am using almost strictly paint. In some areas I added a little bit of extra water to it. The high flow acrylic already is super, super runny. It's made to go through airbrushes and airbrush nozzles and tubes, so it's very, very, very thin. But sometimes, and it has a really great color to it. It's super saturated, which is one of the only reasons that I add water to it. Sometimes is to dilute that that richness that the color has. Oh, and these are the reinforcements, the tag reinforcements from when I cut the tags earlier. And I'm putting the dark one on the light tag and the light one on the dark tag. I hadn't done it yet because I was still deciding if I wanted those, but I really like how that turned out. And here I'm going to come back in one last time with a bit heavier, darker splatter on top of some of those lighter effects that we got earlier. And the jump in the video is from me pausing the video or stopping the video and then coming back to it. I mentioned that earlier. I leave, whether it's to go to work or even to go to bed or something like that. And I work on a lot of projects over time. Very rarely do I sit and do an entire project in one day. I have now a piece of muslin similar width to the one that I kind of put the skirt on the card, and I am coloring it with that sepia colored high flow acrylic so that it has that kind of gorgeous grungy rusty orange color to it. That's kind of the theme of this tag set. There is a really great teal in the Fortune color line as well, or teal or blue, but I avoided that kind of element for these two tags and focused on the more neutral based portions of the line. There, now you can see exactly where I'm going to put that muslin. I really love that at the top. I'm sticking with the DMC floss here. The DMC floss comes with 6 or 8 threads of the same color of thread, like woven together or spun together, I guess I could say. And so now I'm just taking a couple seconds here and pulling all of those individual strings out. I really love fibers and textures, and I love paper and chipboard and stencils and stamps and fabric and metal and all kinds of pieces. Mixed media is definitely the right word for me to use in my artwork or my projects. So I stapled some of those fibers that I pulled apart onto the background of the dark tag, and now I'm using another piece of DMC floss. I've thread the colored muslin through the top of my light tag, and I'm tying that off. You'll see me in a little bit after I start gluing things down. That bow, it's really not it's just really not doing it for me. I feel like it's a little bit too feminine or girly for the line, specifically for the tags that I'm making, so I'll end up just clipping that off, but we'll get there. Now I've got out the sentiment stickers from the Fortune Teller collection, and the little drawer pull is a piece from Graphic 45, piece of vintage hardware that they have. Excuse me. And I kind of held it up to some of the sentiment stickers that were there that I knew would fit, so that I could know what would fit inside the drawer pull as a label. And I'm positioning that on, figuring out exactly where I'd like it. I ended up moving it just a little bit back up towards the more towards the sun and moon, so that the pull of the drawer actually didn't hang below the tag. Oh, there you can see now I trimmed up that DMC floss, and I also kind of scrunched the ends of it so that it started to fray and it was a little bit more distressed. Just picking out some matching brads here so that I can put my drawer pull into place and have that there. I don't want to put anything else behind it. I know that for sure. So I'm going to go ahead and poke a hole in there with the Tim Holtz poker and secure that in place with some brads. All right, looking good. These are some of the Finnabair mechanicals for Prima. They're stars. It comes in a 5-pack, I think. They're metal, but they're already pre-rusty, which is really great because that's kind of already the feel I'm going for, using the colors of the Fortune Teller collection, plus using the paint that oxidizes itself. These stars were already done, and they're metal, and they're heavy, and they're a really great complement to everything I was already working on. So I just took them straight out of the package. I got out some golden gel medium, heavy gel medium, to put them down with. And they're also, earlier I stapled some of those fibers in places, but the stars are just going to reinforce the connection between the fibers and the paper, and everything's going to kind of really hold itself all together here. I mentioned earlier, and now you can see that that's happening, I double up the foam that's on the back of the card so that it sticks up just that much more. It has really great depth to it, which I really enjoy. And it plays well with the drawer pull that's on the other tag because it has a lot of dimension to it too, being a more vintage, like realistic type piece. And at first I thought that the little star on the top left was going to be enough under one piece of foam that everything would be equal, but I ended up popping another piece of foam back there just to kind of keep everything balanced and so the bottom left corner wasn't tucking down. There we go. And I did use a little bit of gel medium to reinforce those that dimensional adhesive as well. I don't want anything popping apart at a later date. Now this part, I'm going to show you the beginning part because it is here and it is a really great technique to use. I just picked the wrong color. So you can see I've got that antique linen distress stain. It is a great color, but on such small pieces it doesn't end up showing up very well. But this is Star Confetti chipboard from UmWowStudio, and I'm going to cover it in gesso and then I'll spray it with the distress stain. It just doesn't pick up enough of the color because the pieces are so small. They just look white. And so I end up doing something else with them. I do still use them, but I just thought I would leave this in as it's a really great technique for coloring chipboard and getting a little bit of oomph on your chipboard. You could use any other sprays or anything like that, but just make sure the color is a little bit more intense than this antique linen. It's just, I think it's just a little bit too close to white. But you could use I could have used like a rusty orange color or the honey color, maybe spice marmalade. That might be too orange. But you could also use like Prima Bloom sprays or any of the sprays really. And I know at this point they look fairly saturated, but then as soon as it dries, there's not much color left. So not a big deal. And yeah, I do try them out just to see if that white kind of looks good, but it was too stark for everything I was working on. So I got out some glitter, some extra fine glitter from Prima and Finnabair, and this came in the gold or I think it was a gold set. Yeah, there's like 3 or 4 golds, kind of like an antique gold, a brass, a silver, a copper, that kind of stuff. So I'm covering those now, and it's great that they're white because by covering them in the gesso first, then I was able to make sure that the glitter showed up really well. So it's gesso and then that distress stain spray, which actually isn't even really working, and then a really small layer, a thin layer of more gel medium. The same gel medium I've been using through the whole project, just some golden heavy gel medium, and then a douse with some extra fine glitter. And they look very sparkly and vintage and cool. And one of the things that I really like about working with glitter, other people don't like it so much, but when I'm working on a project that I have something that's glittery, I like when the glitter falls off a little bit because then it kind of adds a little bit of sparkle to the rest of the project. And in one of the photos, you can see that happening. It's kind of a little bit on the sun and moon, and then it shows up a little bit on the orange or rusty colored muslin that's at the top of the tag too. So now I'm just going to kind of play with placement a little bit and make sure that I like how these are. And I always try to kind of make tips about different things in my videos. And so if you've heard this before, I apologize for being repetitive, but your brain and your subconscious really are drawn to odd numbers. So when you're working on a project and you've maybe put some embellishments down or you're kind of planning with embellishments and it just seems off and you can't figure out why, give a quick count to your embellishments, maybe all the round ones or all the stars or all this or all that, or maybe even your clusters. Maybe maybe you have 2 clusters or 4 clusters. And the reason I say 2 or 4 is because your subconscious is really drawn to odd numbers. And so try to keep things like 3, 5, 7. Usually after that, it's not as big of an issue or a deal because there are too many for you to count quickly. So yeah, just a tip there. Keep things in odd numbers and they tend to be a bit more aesthetically pleasing in general. It's not a rule you have to follow, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. So that's what I've done. I started with 3, and then I knew I for sure wanted 1 more, so I tucked an itty bitty baby in between the rays, and then that seemed like it was perfect. So I ended up with 5 of those pretty glitter stars, and then I've got 3 rusty stars on the other tag. And everything's turning out just perfect. I'm super stoked with my Dreamer tag duo. The last little piece of business here is to tie up that tag, and I'm going to use some DMC floss for that. So that's it. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm always super stoked to take a quick trip on the 7.Studio blog, and I'll see you around. Feel free to subscribe to my channel, and you can expand the description here for a link to products. Thanks so much. Bye.